Net migration has fallen dramatically. After the blowback from the budget, some seemingly better news for the government today. The difference between those arriving and leaving the country is at the lowest level for 4 years. Net migration peaked at a record 944,000 in the year to March 2023. It's now dropped by nearly 80% to 204,000. The government were quick to claim credit.
It's about bringing back that order, that control, and ensuring that legal migration isn't an open door, which is what we saw under the last government, so that British workers aren't being undercut. But we've still got a long way to go, both on legal and illegal migration.
In fact, the fall has been driven by restrictions introduced by the Conservatives, including salary thresholds for care workers and a ban on them and international students bringing dependents to the UK. Immigration is one of the most divisive issues of our time, and the new numbers aren't all good news for the government, because they show that the number of people claiming asylum now makes up a bigger proportion of the net migration figures. Nearly 110,000 people have claimed asylum in the year to September, and around 46,000 of these arrived in small boats across the Channel. In an exclusive interview, we've spoken to a Home Office insider whose job it is to assess asylum claims.
Morale amongst staff is really low. Burnout is high, staff sickness. There's so many people who are signed off as long-term sick because of a direct consequence because of the stress of the job.
They didn't want to be identified, and so we've used an actor to voice their words. They told us staff burnout means targets are regularly missed, and so Labour introduced cash incentives for staff.
The Home Office is absolutely desperate to keep us. We also get £50 vouchers if we exceed our weekly target, so those six decisions a week. But again, it's so difficult, and I know very few people who are getting those vouchers. The burnout is just so high. I'm probably a bit of an anomaly. I've been there for several years now. Most people don't even last 2 years. If you manage to last a year, you get £1,500 bonus. And then if you last 2 years, you get £2,500.
But could the bonuses lead to poor asylum decisions? The Home Office denied introducing the scheme in a panic as they tried to find a solution to the number of asylum seekers, 36,000, stuck in hotels. That's 7,000 more than when Labour took office. It's a hugely contentious issue and has led to protests across the country. There's a concern that under political pressure to reduce the backlog, some claims are being rushed through. Appeals are up, and our insider told us there's an acceptance within the Home Office that 25% of decisions will be overturned.
They do this thing called dip sampling as well, where they take maybe a handful of cases just to kind of test the quality markers of decisions we're making. And in those, it's a much higher figure than 25% that they've said will probably be overturned at a tribunal level. And many of those will go in favour to the person that's claiming asylum.
The Home Office wouldn't comment on these claims. They told us that thanks to the dedication of staff, asylum decisions have increased. The removal of illegal migrants is accelerating, and enforcement has reached record levels. The Home Secretary has introduced controversial new measures to stop small boat crossings. But this week, an asylum seeker has been jailed after managing to make the crossing twice. Morteza Argi first arrived in September 2022, and after leaving the country voluntarily, he came back by boat in August. The district judge questioned why he wasn't detained in Dover instead of being allowed to live in a hotel. Until this issue is seen to be tackled, it'll continue to dominate the debate, even as net migration is down to its lowest level in half a decade.
Well, joining me now is the former Director General of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith, and the Refugee Council's Chief Executive, Enver Solomon. Enver Solomon first. When you look at the figures, close to a record 110,000 asylum seekers, is it any wonder that Labour's aping Conservative policies on that issue, do you think?
Well, it doesn't have to. I don't think you defeat reform by trying to be tougher than them or sounding like them. I think there is a majority in this country that recognise we should give people a fair hearing if they come here. And let's remember,
do you think there is that
from.
majority? Because you don't get that sense from hearing the political
You don't
parties
get that
speak.
sense, no. But I think the polling that we've done and work in focus groups is very clear. If people have a case that they are a genuine refugee, people think they should be given the opportunity to have their case heard and then go on and allowed to contribute and give back to our communities.
Tony Smith, let me put that to you. Do you think there is a majority who support giving refuge to people from war-torn countries, for example?
I think there are a number of people that take the view that we should be a humanitarian nation. Yes, we should take people through refugee routes, and I know that's something that Enver advocates. However, I think there's also a significant number of people that are very concerned to see large numbers of undocumented migrants not properly vetted, coming across without passports, who are being released into our communities without proper checks, let alone assessing their claims. Those numbers are becoming overwhelming for the Border Force and Immigration Enforcement. And I think there are concerns in our communities that these sorts of numbers are not really acceptable, particularly when they're placed in hotels or asylum accommodation next to their own homes.
I mean, Enver, that's the point, isn't it? And you heard it from that Home Office whistleblower in Darshna's report. This is a system in chaos. Do you have any hope that the current government is fixing it or not?
Well, look, we need a system that secures the borders, that is competent, makes decisions in a timely fashion. And if you are a refugee, you're allowed to contribute, supported to contribute. And if you're not, you are returned to the country that you've come from. And at the moment, we don't have a system that's effective. Hotels are a visceral image of a system that isn't working, and we shouldn't be using hotels. We could get out of hotels if we had a system that made decisions, carried out the security checks that Tony talks about, and allows people to stay if they are refugees, and did it in a timely fashion.
Tony, the number of EU citizens leaving, do you think a lot of voters would prefer a higher number of economic migrants from the EU, for example, to refugees arriving particularly on small boats in the undocumented manner that you suggested?
I don't know really what voters would think. I mean, my own view is that we do need to look below the surface of these figures. They're very complicated. Lots of people put different spins on them. I've been reading them all day. I mean, it is generally good news, I think, for most people that the overall number has come down very significantly from the Boris wave, because I am concerned about our capacity to integrate people into our society at the numbers we were getting. But on the other hand, the figures also show that we've got net outflows of EU citizens, as you say, and also net outflows of British citizenship. The vast majority, in fact, the main inflow is of visa nationals coming in, still about 380,000 a year, which is about the size of a city like Newcastle. They're still coming in, and I'm still concerned whether or not we have the ability and the capacity to integrate those sorts of numbers of people.
I'll put that to Enver in a second, but just on that point, we used to rely on EU migrants to staff our restaurants and do building work. I mean, isn't there an economic hit to more EU migrants now returning to the EU than staying?
Well, I don't know that it's so much a matter about EU anymore. We've had the Brexit discussion, we've had the Brexit vote, and we've left the EU. And so free movement of 500 million people from the EU into this country no longer prevails. They need to get permits the same as anybody from anywhere else in the world. But I do think we need to look at the visa cohorts that we are bringing in. The last government, as you say in your report, they recognised there was a failure in issuing too many care worker visas, too many student dependent visas, vast numbers of people coming in here that we couldn't really assimilate, that weren't economically active. So I think we are seeing from both this government and the last government a drive to try and make migration more effective than it has been. But I'm not quite sure we're there just yet.
Enver.
Look, migration is a positive for our economy. There's no question about that. And we're a country of migrants. I mean, look at the numbers of people across our communities who are a product of mixed marriages, a product of migration. My own parents, my mother came here as a migrant. I'm a product of a mixed marriage. Migration is who we are as a nation.
Yeah, but migration at these levels?
Well, migration is about how a country absorbs people and enables them to integrate and contribute. And migrants have contributed to this nation to become proud Britons. At the Refugee Council, we work with refugees. We teach them English. They want to get a job. They want to get educated. They want to contribute. They don't want to sit at home on benefits, and they want to give back to communities. And that is the migrant story that we should celebrate and be proud of.
But Tony's point is that the integration is not happening. What's your response to that?
Well, look, I think it is happening. I think there are parts of the country where there are challenges, and we need to support people to integrate and to learn English and to get jobs. But the vast majority of refugees and migrants want to contribute, want to integrate, and they do. There are refugees today who have come here from Afghanistan and are now working in the front line of the NHS, and we should be proud of that and celebrate that.
Tony, there's an economic and public service benefit to refugees and migrants, as you've just heard Enver say.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think that was the perceptions over the years. That has been a perception of economic benefits of migration. We've seen migration advisory reports over the years suggesting that, and Treasury usually out-briefing the Home Office at Cabinet that this is an economic benefit. But recent studies have showed it's not actually. If you're bringing in low-paid workers, if you're bringing in vast numbers of dependents and students who aren't economically active, that actually there is an economic disbenefit to the country if they stay and don't go back. So whilst I do also agree with them that we should welcome genuine migrants that are going to contribute to our economy, and we are a diverse society. I agree with that as well. But nonetheless, I think there is a dividing line here, or a drawing line, that actually some people that do come across are not economically active. Some of them, I'm afraid, are quite harmful in terms of the illegal population. And I think people are rightly concerned about that.
Enver?
Well, I mean, this idea that refugees and people seeking asylum are harmful, I just don't accept this.
Well, some are.
There are, of course, there are people who commit criminal acts and they should be dealt with by the criminal justice system. But the vast majority of refugees who come here want to work hard, give back and become proud Britons.
Just briefly, I mean, you talked about your mum coming here in the 60s. How's your own family been affected by this, and you yourself been affected by this hostile and quite divisive debate?
There is a more hostile environment. Our staff are facing more hostility. The refugees we work with are facing more hostility. The Secretary of State for Health, Wes Streeting, has talked about people working in the front line in the NHS facing more hostility. That is now the reality for my staff, for myself, for our organisation, and I think it reflects the fact that we don't have politicians that want to stand up and celebrate the diversity and the vibrant multiculturalism that is the UK today.
Enver Solomon, Tony Smith, thank you both very much for joining us.